Let me begin by providing an overview of our fiscal and budget outlook. I think it's critically important to remember the economic crisis we faced just a short time ago. By mid to late 2008, we were in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. The economy shrunk at a rate of 6.8% in the fourth quarter of 2008. Unemployment was surging, with 800,000 private sector jobs lost in January of 2009 alone. A housing crisis was rippling through the economy, with home building and home sales plummeting and record foreclosures. And we face a financial market crisis that threatened to set off a global economic collapse. I will never forget being called to an emergency meeting in the leader's office in the fall of 2008. I arrived at about 6 o'clock. There were the leaders of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, Senate and the House, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, the Secretary of the Treasury in the previous administration. And they told us they were taking over AIG the next morning. They believed that if they did not, there would be a financial collapse. Those were very, very serious days. And the federal response to the crisis, I believe, has successfully pulled the economy back from the brink. And this year we've begun to see a return to economic and job growth, although both are weaker than we would hope. Two of our witnesses from last week's hearing, Dr. Blinder and Dr. Zandi, completed a study that measures the impact of the federal response to the crisis. I'd like to highlight their findings and then ask Dr. Elmendorf to comment in his testimony on whether CBO has found a similar impact and result. Dr. Blinder and Dr. Zandi's report said in part, and I quote, "We find that the federal response effects on real GDP, jobs, and inflation are huge and probably averted what could have been called Great Depression II. When all is said and done, the financial and fiscal policies will have cost taxpayers a substantial sum, but not nearly as much as most had feared, and not nearly as much as if policymakers had not acted at all. If the comprehensive policy responses saved the economy from another depression, as we estimate, they were well worth their cost." This chart compares the jobs we've actually had in our economy recently with an estimate of the jobs we would have had without the federal response. It shows that we would have had 8.1 million fewer jobs in the second quarter of 2010 if we had not had the federal response. Let me go to the next chart. We see a similar picture with the unemployment rate. The actual unemployment rate on a quarterly basis is now hovering at about 9.7%. That is still far too high, and we must do more to create jobs and bring this rate down. But if we had not had the federal response, the unemployment rate would now be 15%. Again, this is according to the analysis by Dr. Blinder and Dr. Zandi, and would continue rising to 16.2% by the fourth quarter of 2010. So clearly, the federal response to the economic crisis has had and continues to have a significant positive impact on the economy. But clearly, we're not out of the woods. The economy remains unsteady and faces strong headwinds. That's why in the near term, I believe we need to focus on providing additional liquidity to boost demand and promote job creation. We cannot afford to repeat the mistake of the mid-1930s when recovery measures were pulled back too quickly and the Great Depression was prolonged. At my request, CBO has previously provided Congress with the ranking of the bang for the buck we get from various federal policies designed to spur economic growth. This chart depicts some of the policy options ranked by CBO. On the upper end of the scale, it shows that policies like extending unemployment insurance and providing a payroll tax relief for firms hiring unemployed workers give you a higher impact on GDP for each dollar spent. Also at my request, CBO has now done further refinements of these rankings to help Congress as it considers options going forward. I look forward to hearing from Director Elmendorf about CBO's latest findings in this area. In addition to the near-term economic challenge, we must also confront the looming long-term budget crisis. The retirement of the baby boom generation, rising health care costs, and our outdated and inefficient tax system are projected to explode deficits and debt in the years ahead. I might say, if we extend all the tax cuts permanently, that would have a profound effect on increasing deficits and debt as well. According to CBO, federal debt could rise to 400% of gross domestic product by 2054. That is 44 years from now. That is a completely unsustainable course. What we should be doing now is putting in place deficit reduction policies that will kick in after the economy has more fully recovered. By establishing and enacting these policies now, we will reassure the financial markets the United States is confronting its long-term fiscal imbalances. Let me just conclude by what Chairman Bernanke has said earlier this year about the need for a credible plan to address our long-term fiscal challenges. He said, and I quote, "A sharp near-term reduction in our fiscal deficit is probably neither practical nor advisable. However, nothing prevents us from beginning now to develop a credible plan for meeting our long-term fiscal challenges. Indeed, a credible plan that demonstrated a commitment to achieve long-run fiscal sustainability could lead to lower interest rates and more rapid growth in the near term." I believe that. That is why I believe the work of the President's Fiscal Commission is so important. As members of that commission, Senator Gregg and I can attest to the hard work being done by the Commission. I remain hopeful that we will come up with a bipartisan plan that puts the nation back on track.